Hello and welcome back to another episode of Giant Talk. I'm your host, Roger. And as you should know by now, I love having interesting people along to chat with, and today's no exception. We have joining us today James Pels, who is founder of Proven EA. Now, the EA stands for Enterprise Agility, doesn't it, James?
That's right. Hi, Roger.
Okay, hi there. So, tell us a bit about yourself, James.
Well, I've been playing the tech game for 20 odd years, probably in 30 odd years if we go back way back when, and been dabbling with agile ways of working, more or less all of that without realizing it initially. And set up Proven EA 10 years ago. It was called Peak Consultancy. It's now Proven EA, with a focus on helping clients really not waste time on things they shouldn't be building, and been a part of that has been building a toolkit around that. So 10 years have been focusing in this space with a long history of software dev, database things and so on behind that.
Right. Okay. So 10 years under your belt. Yeah. Okay. A few stories to share, I'm sure. And I'm curious because I noticed that you often describe yourself as a chief elephant spotter. So yes. I've got to ask, what's that all about?
It started as a joke about 2016, 2017, in the consultancy world when I first started doing public talks, and found that what was business management consultancy really about. And so often it's finding the same 4 or 5 problems in companies, things that people don't want to talk about, things that employees are saying are wrong, that no one's doing anything with, and really being the person to be able to go in and help them spot those elephants in the room, if you like, and then be able to address them, because all of a sudden they become something that they can talk about.
Okay. And typical elephants, you said there's 4 or 5, could you name a couple of them for us?
Oh, huge waste, lack of alignment, partly where Proven EA came from. That's one of the big ones. Poor communication, people not being clear what they're actually after. A lot of very, very top-down communications rather than engaging teams in working together. Not handling change properly, thinking that just doing one thing, a transactional change event, if you like, is enough rather than embedding it and tackling the cultural challenges. They're in that space.
Some meaty topics there to get your teeth into. and so, you joined us today to talk about one of those. Do you want to tell our listeners which one we're going to deep dive into today?
Sure. It's the tackling waste in terms of what we're actually working on. Something I found a lot, and it's where I've been specialising at Proven EA, is in what we're building rather than how we're building it. I was listening to your fantastic podcast last week with Luke Fisher, and he was talking about psychological safety in teams. I think vitally important. But there's a lot of people, very, very good Scrum Masters I know, very good coaches I know working in that space, people like Luke, helping teams work more effectively. What's bugged me with this is no matter how well we get teams working, if they're not working on the right thing, then then that efficiency is waste essentially. And so it's hugely important what he's doing, that we work well, that we work fast enough, that we work to high quality. But we also need to work on the right thing. And sometimes I think organizations lose sight of that and kind of have this vision and a strategy, and you've got the grand ideas, but then it gets diverted into all sorts of different means, and you don't get there.
Kind of get lost in translation sometimes, doesn't it?
Yes. Very much so.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like, why wouldn't you want to work on the right thing? I mean, how on earth can you not work on the right thing? But it is, you're right, it is so easy, isn't it, to either not understand it or understand it, start on it and get blown off track.
Yeah, very much. A common pattern. We have a small product, or a small team. It's really easy if you're a CEO or a CTO in a room with half a dozen people or a dozen people, because you can have those conversations over a desk, and it might be a bit top-down communication, but generally it's two-way because you're in that same space. You build something, that something works, and it's going in the direction of the leader. As it starts growing, though, you lose those one-to-one comms. Things get harder to manage as you get more people on board. And it becomes a vehicle almost. Well, that's been really, really successful. I know my idea, I can shoehorn that into it. And someone else has an idea that they haven't really thought around or haven't engaged with other people around, and they want to go off in a different direction slightly. And that becomes something to invest in, and then something else becomes something to invest in. And then that one direction that you're going in is becoming 3 and 4 and 5 and many. And you often find that they're not complementary, and those efforts are pulling against each other rather than together. So it's not through ill will; it's just things evolve and are allowed to have that because there's no framework holding it together.
Yeah, and it's the old saying, isn't it, that you can start from the same starting point, and then you only have to have 1 degree of difference there, and later you're miles apart.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what I'm not advocating is keeping that voice at the top being the sole direction, if you like, but it needs to be a way of tying together what the teams are doing with the overall vision and making sure that the golden thread is maintained. So not so much, like I say, it shouldn't be dictatorial, and it can't be dictatorial, but we can maintain that relationship.
So what is it that you do advocate? So, let's share. I'm sure the listeners will be really keen to hear, what you do in this situation. I've been collecting a series of tools over the last 5-10 years, if you like, and built a toolkit at the back of it. It's not yet another framework. It really is a toolkit of things people can use. But the idea behind it, it's based on something called the VMOS model, which is vision, mission, objective, strategy, tactics. So the vision is, what outcomes do we want this organization or product to have? These can be grand things. So it can be, for a payment company, it might be, I want to eliminate fraud. I want to make mobile payments accessible globally. So these are big outcomes. Then we've got to think around, how do we get there? Not so much what are the nuts and bolts of it, but the big missions we're going on in terms of, I've got this, I'm measuring something around fraud. How do I get that fraud needle down? How do I get that accessibility needle up? And you start thinking about what actually really matters in terms of this organization to achieve that vision that we've got. From those missions, we can have a number of objectives start coming into that. So following that one through, an example might be building out some new technology that someone's thought of. That can be an objective. It might be a year, 2 years long, ties in with OKRs and things, but from I know from your background. So the objectives are the first tangible things we have that we're actually trying to achieve. And those tangibles, those objectives are only ever part of the mission, and those missions are only ever to achieve that vision. If anything changes, we remap. And under the objectives, we have strategies. How am I going to achieve the objective? This is business units working together, business functions working together. And then we have the individual tactics. So how are teams going to deliver? And this is where the classic agile thing, or project management, or whatever else comes into it. So how are we going to function? All the way through there, it's maintaining that thread back up to what is the vision we're trying to achieve. So there should be no bit of work happening in an organization that I can't say, this contributes to the vision like this. That's what I'm advocating for. Yeah. And how, when you're working with a client, that I assume obviously they ask you in because they're not working that way and they want to move to that way. How easy is that transition for you? Where do you see, I'm assuming, some challenges emerge from?
It's interesting you say that people ask me in to help with that challenge. A lot of people don't realize they have that challenge.
Right.
A classic one can be, we're not getting the results that we think we should be getting, or the development team or delivery team isn't performing. And then you start having a look, and I've been down this route a few times, hence the chief elephant spotter thing again. I start having a look at where things are coming from. And a really, really good example, I'm not going to name the companies, it's quite small and I'll know who they were, working with the leadership team there, who said that the development team isn't functioning. Have a look at what the development team's doing. They're working their socks off. There's some great folk in that team, 15, 20 of them. Each week they're being pulled in a different direction. Can we do a new thing? Can we do a new thing? Can we do a new thing? And track that one back up. And it's the leadership team, also great people, working with good intentions, with grand visions, whatever else. But they're not communicating with each other, and they're not seeing how do the things that they want from their different departments relate to each other. So it then becomes, what's the next thing I can ask the team to do, and a loud voice, and the team just says yes. And then the same thing happens with the next department, and the same thing happens with the next department. With them, it was all around, what are you trying to achieve then, and how do you work together to make sure that you're giving that team a consistent pipeline? So that's a simple environment, simple environment for this to work in, with quite a small organisation. But essentially it's a small example of a much bigger problem. I'm working now with a large defence client. I'm doing this with several hundred people rather than a few tens of people. But their challenge was, we know the teams are working well, and we've got a whole bunch of different requirements coming in from different places. How do we manage this into a roadmap? Yeah. Again, the roadmap on that one was, okay, well, what do you want your roadmap to achieve? Because we can build out a series of things, go build a feature, go build a feature, go build a feature. That doesn't really help unless you know why you're building those features. So, and that age-old expression, start with why, it's a lovely thing. Going back to that vision of what you're trying to achieve, in their example, it was, what do you want this thing that you're building to do? And then from there, each of these things that people are asking you for, does it really help achieve that? Is it an implementation of it which makes the thing that you're building useful? Or is it taking the thing that you're building in a different direction? If it's going in a different direction, you've really got to ask yourself, is it valuable? And then start being able to say no. So again, another lovely thing with product ownership. One of the most important things there from a product owner's point of view, or product manager's point of view, being able to say no to stakeholders, but say it in a reasoned way and why we're not going to be doing something. So, yeah, and thank you for asking the question. People pull me in to solve that problem. Less so, but that tends to be the root of a lot of challenges. As soon as someone says a team isn't performing or we're not getting the results, there's a little light going off and thinking, right, what are you working on and why are you doing it?
And you mentioned about making sure that everything is directly contributing to, the vision, that golden thread. Is there room for the likes of innovation in that? Because that might not always have a clear alignment.
Okay, so as I've mentioned the top-down communications, and I've mentioned the VMOS model. One of the things that's, I talk about this with quite a few people. If you start off, we have the vision and we have the team, so we've got the V and the T bit of it. The vision is this leadership's grand view of where you want to go, and the team and the building it. And at a small scale, that all works fine. But that tends to be very much more of the leader telling the team what they want, and the team coming back with what's achievable. You end up with innovation going on and down because the team says, well, we can't really do that, but we could do this instead, and so on. With the VMOS model, all we're really doing is adding a few more layers in and giving structure to that. So yes, the leaders have to own that vision and mission, because they and the shareholders, the funders, they're the ones putting the money in, and they're the ones to know what they want to be achieving. But we still have the teams and the business units. They're the ones who know what's the art of the possible is. So in the individual strategies and tactics, what can be done? The O in the objectives piece, this is where some of the magic happens from my point of view in here. It's where the vision and mission meets the art of the possible, and that has to be negotiated. So I want to start moving these KPI needles. I want to start seeing these changes. Okay, that's great. This is what we can do. There's 6 of us, or there's 10 of us, or there's 20 of us, whatever else. This is the art of the possible where we are now. So let's set objectives together. And as we're going through that, there's absolutely nothing stopping the teams coming up with whatever strategy, whatever tactics they want. And I have seen a big break put on hold at the objective level. We've had a much better idea if we do this instead. The whole point of it is I would expect tactics to change quite frequently. I would expect strategies to change less often. I'd expect objectives to be lasting a year or so. There's nothing stopping it if we come up with a better idea and think, we're going to get a much better result on our mission by doing this instead. Great. Stop that objective. If we start changing, if we come up with a better set of objectives, you might want to tweak the mission because you think, we can move those needles much better by doing this instead. And that's all fine. None of this is set in stone. It needs to be iterative. It needs to be constantly negotiated across the teams. And again, I'm going to come back to your conversation last week with Luke Fisher talking about psychological safety and trust between teams and leadership. I think a vital part of that is allowing the teams a say in where they're going and the direction. And if your leadership says, or listens to a team, and the team says, we've got a much better idea, and leadership turns around and says, actually, yeah, that's a great idea, we'll do that, you're going to get much better buy-in from the team.
Yeah.
Value, do they feel they have an input?
Yeah. You said something there which pricks my interest, because you mentioned there was a point at which, I think it was in the forming of the objective, where there has to be a negotiation. Mm-hmm. Just can you expand on that for us a little bit as to how you see that play out?
I would expect the leadership or the product ownership or whatever we're calling whatever the leading group is. Mm-hmm. They've set a direction. This is the outcome we want our product or organization to achieve. These are the journeys that we feel are really, really important. We need to move this needle. On the Proven EA website, I've got the toolkit on there, and there's a worked example of a fictional mobile payments company, and they've got a vision of very, very low fraud world where mobile payments are accessible to everyone. They're starting off in this fictional scenario with a fraud index, which is actually okay. It's probably a bit above average. And they've got a great idea for expanding accessibility, and they're only in the UK, and so they know they need to go global. So the missions that they're looking at, they don't worry about the fraud one, because they're already on the curve on that one, and in investing that is essentially opportunity cost elsewhere. So they set these two missions out there, and that has to be coming from the leadership level about what changes we want to affect. I would then open it up to the rest of the organisation and anyone else around that. Right, propose candidate objectives. What can we do that's going to help on this? Mm-hmm. And I would expect then a long list of things to be coming in. Great ideas, some wacky, some on the money, some that you think, oh, well, if we combine those two together, we actually get a good result. And the initial ones are coming in within a few weeks, but you can be going around this loop for quite a while initially. Having a look at the objectives that are coming in. Ooh, I like that one, I don't like this one so much, that's going to cost too much. What's the risk profile on this? Chances are we haven't actually looked at risk profile on it or anything so far. And as you start delving into these or digging into them more deeply, I sound like ChatGPT there. As you start digging into these things, you find reasons that why one works better than another, and what we thought was going to be a big needle move from one actually isn't, and it doesn't really get us in the direction that we want, so we can that one off. But that sparks an idea elsewhere. So it is, and when I'm giving this talk publicly, there's a big flash thing up. Setting objectives is a game for the whole organisation. It has to be everyone involved in that, because ultimately it's the teams delivering this and the business units delivering this, and putting their necks on the line saying what's achievable, and it's the business leadership putting their necks on the line and saying, right, we're going to fund it. So they have to have faith in that, and you're not going to have faith in it if you haven't got teams who genuinely understand what it is that you're doing.
It's almost kind of agreeing the contract, isn't it, so to speak? Yeah.
Without the contract, yes.
Yes. I mean, not in a legal sense, but in kind of like a metaphorical sense. It's agreeing the contract. We'll do this, but you pay that. You give us that budget. Yeah. No, I see what you mean by negotiated. It's interesting that the way that you approach it, you allow for perhaps quite a lot of ideation to happen across the organisation. What I find is that time is often of the essence, so you have to try and expedite that to a certain degree, and so kind of keeping it into, still allowing room for ideation, but keeping it in a smaller scope sometimes helps to move things forward, albeit you won't always get the full breadth of ideas that you would do if you opened up to the full organisation. And some organisations, like some of the ones that I've worked with, are 15, 20,000 people, so it's going to be a challenge to do that in the first place. Yeah,
okay, so a few things around that. I do believe there is, well, I've seen, not in 15, 20,000 organisations, but certainly a few thousand, that this process does work. But I also agree with you that if I walked into an organisation and said, right, everyone stop, we're having great ideas thinking right now, I'm going to last on that gig for about 3.5 minutes before the CEO kicks me out the door. Yeah. There are almost certainly things that an organisation is working on at this point. we're not going to stop doing those things immediately, but we can have a look through what's going on at the moment. Are they contributing? Which ones not contributing? Wind down the ones that aren't. Strategic decisions to be made. Do we continue, or does the organisation continue with the things which are already going, or do we kill them off at some cost? From there, we can then start expanding it out and ramping it up over a period of 3-6 months in terms of building up to that point of, these are the missions that we're actually now agreeing on, because chances are we haven't got the missions defined properly at that point. The organisation thinks it knows where it's going, and it's going after something, but it doesn't really quite know what. So it's all a case of refine down from that. To start off with, there has to be a case of what matters. What matters right now? What are you trying to achieve right now? What are your next collectively on the line for delivering in the next 3-6 months? Focus on those things. If you've got something which is just starting to be delivering in 9 months or a year's time, let's have a good think about that. And then the pipeline beyond that, this is where this process really comes into it. It also really, really works if we have a small organisation spinning up, so a couple hundred people going off in a direction, or a new product being spun up. Because at that point, you're doing it in a greenfield world, and you're not trying to reinvent everything all in one go, because you probably are starting off with a pretty good idea what that direction is and what the first few things that we need are. So it's how you apply it around. But there's also that piece of, there's a hump to be got over, and it's exactly the point that you were calling out. When you first land with an organisation who has a challenge, you need to get over that initial hump, and that, you're working in a pragmatic way. Beyond that, when you get the direction going in the right way, and you get people thinking in the right way, then this approach works. You can bring it in more and more and more strongly. And once you pass the hump, and you've got the initial mission set out, and you know what the objectives are, from that point you're in incremental change. You're not in mass change.
Yeah. So, I'm curious about budgets. Yeah. And in your experience, which do you usually find comes first, the mission or the budget?
The budget, almost always. This is how much money we've got. What's realistic? What's achievable? Again, for me, setting these objectives, having very realistic objectives, and understanding what the risk profile is, understanding what the likely cost of it's going to be. I find that hugely important, because I've also found that while the budget might be X million now, the budget might be quite a lot more million if you can show that we actually have some success. Because chances are, certainly from the experience I've had with organisations, budget is limited mainly because people aren't seeing results, and they're saying, "Well, I'm willing to put a bit in, but you haven't delivered in the last 2 years. Why should I believe you're going to start delivering now?" I'm being harsh, but it's a very common scenario. When you start saying, or when you start helping that team get to a point where, right, we're focusing on 3 things, we're going to deliver this, and we're going to deliver this, and we're going to deliver this, and they actually do deliver those, and then we start getting the benefits, something like what we anticipated, give or take, then the faith in that in that part of the organisation changes. We can go back to second round investment or third round investment, or we can go back to elsewhere in the organisation and say, can we have more funds for this one? Because this is the benefit we're going to get. It isn't feed money into the beast, and the beast might deliver you something in 2 years. It's feed this much money, invest it in a straightforward business case process. This is the return that we're going to offer you within these likely error bands. This is when we're going to be returning it within these likely error bands, and keep adding on in that process. So trying to ask for a huge chunk of funds to go after these massive missions is not a chance to help.
Yeah, and I think it's an interesting one. I completely get where you're coming from, and in large part it reflects my experience as well. That at what point do budgets start to have an influence if you go above the missions to the strategy and so on? I think what I'm saying is I found that some organisations stick absolutely religiously to the budget process, and that will in many respects guide their strategic planning. But then you've got some businesses that actually will perhaps use the strategic planning process to then define the budgets. So I think it can be, but I think what we're talking about here is, I think the missions are a lower level, perhaps, and then you've got the strategy that sits above it, that the missions then are, what then delivers it.
I think it's two ways of looking at the same problem. So we can either invest more in teams and deliver more, or we can say we have a fixed budget. What's the best that we can get for that fixed budget? Again, if I can't tie the work that the teams are doing back to the original vision, I'm not getting value for that money they've invested. So if I have an X million pot and I can't go above my X million pot, then I want to know that I'm going to get the maximum possible return for that. And again, being able to go back down, what return are we going to get for this piece of work? How is it going to contribute to the mission? What needles is it going to move towards our overall vision from this? We're all around how do we move those needles as far as we can? How do we get the best that we can for that input? I think you're touching on something which gets very, very interesting with organizations not knowing what their vision is. So not actually knowing where they want to be going to. And we're almost into feature factory land in some cases. I've seen this where, okay, well, you can have this much pot, but you have to keep churning out this, and you have to keep churning out this, and you have to keep churning out this. Yeah. Well, that you're not helping yourself here.
Yeah, that's a really interesting observation, actually. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it'd be very cool.
No, I was just going to say, so, we've kind of gone around quite a few areas in relation to elephant spotting. Let's wrap things up by leaving listeners with perhaps just one key takeaway. What's that one key takeaway that you would give to them?
Think really, really hard about why you're doing whatever it is that you're doing. If you can't justify why you're doing it as being something which is contributing to what your product or what your organization is doing, think hard about stopping it.
So being a bit ruthless.
Yeah. It's really, really easy for me to add stuff into backlog for a team or for an organization to say, yes, we're going to put the money into that. But ultimately, if it doesn't add value, why are you doing it? We're having a look at the extension at home at the moment, and I'm having a debate with my wife. By the time we put this extension up, are those bedrooms going to be of any use to us? Are we doing it because we got the opportunity to do it? Or is it actually really just going to be a bit of waste because we don't need it? And it's direct analogy for what I see in a lot of companies.
So honest conversations around whether you actually need what's being requested, what's being suggested.
And can you use that money in a better way?
Okay. Right. James, thank you very much. Do you want to just leave our listeners with a few ways that they can contact you, or which obviously I'll put in the show notes, but
thank you, Roger. So the easiest way is on LinkedIn for a lot of people. Put my LinkedIn profile in the notes, as Roger's saying on there. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. I host and regularly attend Lean Agile Manchester events up in Manchester, if anyone's up that neck of the woods, or through the website provenea.com.
Okay. Excellent. Right, well, James, thank you very much. On behalf of our listeners, it's been a really good conversation, and I've really enjoyed it, and I'm sure they will do when they listen in. So I wish you all the best, and thanks for joining us on Giant Talk.
Thank you very much, Roger. Appreciate it.
No problem. And thanks for tuning in, and I look forward to having you join me again for another interesting conversation on Giant Talk in the very near future.